The strongest people you know didn't get there because they had the biggest support system. They got there because they learned how to win when no one was watching. They mastered the psychology of winning alone. Not because they hate people, but because they understand something most never will. Real strength isn't built in crowds. It's built in silence. It's built when you're tired, when you're doubting yourself, when every voice around you says to quit, and you keep going anyway. Most people need constant encouragement. They need someone to push them. They need validation. They need reminders. And the moment that support disappears, they collapse. But there's a different breed of person. Someone who's learned to carry themselves. Someone who's built internal systems so strong that external circumstances can't shake them. Someone who's mastered the art of psychological independence. If you want to build a life that doesn't break every time the wind changes direction, you need to learn the psychology of winning alone. Not because you're antisocial, but because you're anti-dependent. You're building something inside that no one can take away. Chapter 1. Stop looking for someone to save you. Nobody is coming to save you. That's not a harsh truth. That's the foundation of all personal power. The moment you accept that your success, your happiness, your growth, and your future are entirely in your hands, you stop being a victim of circumstance and become the architect of your own life. But most people spend their entire lives waiting for the right mentor, waiting for someone to believe in them, waiting for permission, waiting for encouragement. And while they wait, years pass. Opportunities disappear. Potential gets buried under the weight of dependency. The psychology of winning alone starts with accepting complete responsibility for your outcomes. Not just the good ones, all of them. The failures, the setbacks, the mistakes, the missed opportunities. When you take ownership of everything, you take back your power. You stop blaming external forces and start building internal strength. You stop looking outward for solutions and start developing them from within. This doesn't mean you can't learn from others or accept help when it's offered. It means you don't depend on others for your emotional stability, your motivation, or your sense of direction. You build these things inside yourself so thoroughly that whether people support you or abandon you becomes irrelevant to your progress. You become emotionally self-sufficient. Think about the most successful people you know. Really think about their journey. Yes, they may have had mentors or supporters along the way, but at the core, they were driven by something internal. They had a fire that burned regardless of external validation. They had standards that didn't change based on other people's opinions. They had a vision so clear that criticism couldn't cloud it and praise couldn't distract them from it. The reason most people never reach their potential is because they're constantly looking for external fuel for an internal engine. They want someone else to provide the energy, the direction, the confidence. But that's not how lasting success is built. External motivation is temporary. It comes and goes with people's moods, availability, and interests. If your progress depends on others maintaining enthusiasm for your dreams, you're building your future on sand. When you stop looking for someone to save you, something powerful happens. You start developing self-reliance. You start trusting your own judgment. You start solving your own problems. You stop making excuses about not having the right support system and start becoming your own support system. You develop an internal dialogue that's encouraging rather than defeating. You create private rituals that keep you grounded. You build habits that function regardless of external circumstances. This shift in psychology is profound because it changes how you show up in the world. You stop being needy. You stop seeking validation for every decision. You stop requiring approval before taking action. You become someone who moves with quiet confidence because your strength comes from within, not from the crowd. People can sense this energy. They respect it. They're drawn to it. Ironically, when you stop needing people to save you, more people want to support you. The practice begins with small decisions. Stop asking for advice on things you already know the answer to. Stop seeking approval for choices that align with your values. Stop waiting for someone to tell you it's okay to pursue your goals. Start making decisions based on your own assessment of what's right and what's necessary. Start developing the habit of consulting your inner wisdom before seeking external opinions. Build systems that support your independence. Create morning routines that set your tone, regardless of what others are doing. Develop evening reflections that help you process the day's events without needing to debrief with someone else. Learn to sit with discomfort without immediately reaching out for comfort from others. These practices strengthen your psychological independence and reduce your emotional dependence on external validation. The goal isn't to become isolated or antisocial. The goal is to become so internally strong that you can engage with others from a position of strength rather than need. You offer value instead of seeking it. You provide support instead of constantly requiring it. You become someone others can depend on because you've learned to depend on yourself first. Remember, waiting for someone to save you is just another form of procrastination. It's a way of avoiding the responsibility of saving yourself. But when you embrace that responsibility, when you stop looking outward and start building inward, you discover something remarkable. You had the power all along. You just needed to stop giving it away. Chapter 2. Build your internal scorecard. Most people live their entire lives playing to the wrong scorecard. They measure their worth by external metrics. How many likes they get, how much approval they receive, how impressive they look to others. But winners operate differently. They build an internal scorecard that measures what actually matters: character, effort, growth, and alignment with their values. This internal measurement system is what allows them to stay motivated when external recognition is absent and remain grounded when external praise is abundant. Your internal scorecard is your private metric system for success. It's based on standards you set for yourself, not standards imposed by society, family, or peers. It measures things like: did I give my best effort today? Did I act in alignment with my values? Did I push through when I wanted to quit? Did I learn something new? Did I help someone without expecting anything in return? These are the metrics that actually predict long-term success and satisfaction. The problem with external scorecards is that they're controlled by other people. Someone else decides whether to give you recognition. Someone else determines whether your work is appreciated. Someone else chooses whether to validate your efforts. When you base your self-worth on external validation, you're essentially handing control of your emotional state to people who may not have your best interests at heart, who may not understand your vision, or who may be dealing with their own insecurities and limitations. Building an internal scorecard requires clarity about what you actually value. Not what you think you should value, not what others tell you to value, but what genuinely matters to you at a core level. This takes honest self-reflection. You need to identify the principles that will guide your decisions regardless of external circumstances. These might include integrity, growth, contribution, excellence, authenticity, or courage. Once you identify these core values, they become the foundation of your internal measurement system. The internal scorecard also measures process over results. While external scorecards focus on outcomes you can't always control, internal scorecards focus on efforts you can always control. Did you show up consistently? Did you maintain your standards when it was difficult? Did you stay focused on your priorities despite distractions? These process-oriented metrics are more reliable predictors of long-term success because they're entirely within your control. This doesn't mean you ignore external feedback or become blind to how others perceive your work. It means you filter external input through your internal framework. You listen to feedback that helps you improve while ignoring criticism that's based on jealousy, misunderstanding, or different values. You appreciate recognition when it comes, but don't depend on it for motivation. You use external results as information rather than validation. One of the most powerful aspects of an internal scorecard is that it allows you to find satisfaction in the process rather than just the outcome. When your measurement system is based on effort, growth, and character, you can feel successful even when external results are delayed. You can maintain motivation during the inevitable periods when progress feels slow or invisible. You can stay committed to your path even when others don't understand or support your choices. Building this internal measurement system also protects you from the emotional volatility that comes with external validation. When your self-worth is tied to others' opinions, you're constantly riding an emotional roller coaster. Good feedback lifts you up. Criticism brings you down. But when your scorecard is internal, you maintain emotional stability regardless of external circumstances. You develop a steady confidence that's not dependent on others' moods or judgments. The practice of maintaining an internal scorecard requires daily self-assessment. At the end of each day, ask yourself, how did I do according to my own standards? Where did I excel? Where did I fall short? What can I improve tomorrow? This isn't about being hard on yourself. It's about being honest and intentional. It's about taking responsibility for your effort and character, rather than just your results. Over time, operating from an internal scorecard develops what psychologists call an internal locus of control. You begin to see yourself as the primary driver of your outcomes rather than a victim of circumstances. You take more initiative because you're not waiting for external validation to act. You become more resilient because setbacks don't shake your fundamental sense of worth. You develop authentic confidence because it's based on your own assessment rather than others' opinions. The internal scorecard also allows you to celebrate private victories that external observers might never notice. The day you chose discipline over comfort. The moment you acted with integrity when no one was watching. The time you persisted through difficulty without complaining. These victories might not earn external recognition, but they build character and strength that no external achievement can provide. Remember, the goal isn't to become indifferent to external feedback or recognition. The goal is to develop a measurement system that doesn't depend on external validation for your sense of worth and direction. When you measure yourself by your own standards, when you celebrate your own growth, when you recognize your own effort, you become psychologically independent. You become someone who can win alone because your scorecard is always with you. Chapter 3. Master the art of self-motivation. Self-motivation is the ability to generate energy, enthusiasm, and drive from within, rather than relying on external sources to fuel your actions. It's the difference between being a thermostat and a thermometer. A thermometer simply reflects the temperature of its environment, while a thermostat sets the temperature regardless of external conditions. Masters of self-motivation are thermostats. They create their own energy and maintain their own standards independent of their circumstances or surroundings. The foundation of self-motivation is understanding the difference between intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. Extrinsic motivation comes from external rewards, money, recognition, approval, or avoiding punishment. While these can be effective short-term motivators, they're unreliable for long-term success because they depend on factors outside your control. Intrinsic motivation comes from internal satisfaction, the joy of learning, the satisfaction of growth, the fulfillment of contributing, or the pleasure of mastering a skill. This type of motivation is sustainable because it's generated internally and isn't dependent on external circumstances. Developing self-motivation requires connecting your daily actions to deeper purposes. It's not enough to know what you want to do. You need to understand why you want to do it. What values does this goal serve? How does this action align with your vision of who you want to become? What impact will achieving this have on your life and the lives of others? When your actions are connected to meaningful purposes, you generate motivation from within rather than needing external pushes. Self-motivated people have learned to create their own feedback loops. Instead of waiting for others to tell them they're doing well, they develop internal systems for recognizing progress and celebrating achievements. They keep private records of their growth. They acknowledge their own improvements. They celebrate personal milestones. This internal feedback system provides consistent motivation because it doesn't depend on others' attention or recognition. One of the most important skills in self-motivation is learning to motivate yourself when you don't feel like it. Motivation isn't just about enthusiasm. It's about the ability to take action regardless of your emotional state. Self-motivated people understand that motivation often follows action rather than preceding it. They don't wait to feel motivated. They act first and let motivation catch up. They've learned that discipline creates momentum, and momentum creates motivation. Self-motivation also requires developing a strong relationship with your future self. You need to become skilled at visualizing the person you're becoming and the life you're building. When present actions feel difficult or unrewarding, the ability to connect with your future vision provides the energy to persist. You're not just doing difficult things for abstract goals. You're doing them for the specific person you're committed to becoming. Another crucial aspect of self-motivation is learning to reframe challenges and setbacks. Instead of seeing obstacles as reasons to quit, self-motivated people see them as opportunities to grow stronger. They understand that difficulty is not evidence that they're on the wrong path. It's evidence that they're building character and capabilities. This reframing ability allows them to maintain motivation even when external circumstances are challenging. Self-motivated people also develop rituals and routines that generate energy and focus. These might include morning routines that set a positive tone for the day, workout routines that build physical and mental strength, or evening routines that provide reflection and planning time. These rituals create consistency and structure that support sustained motivation regardless of external circumstances. The practice of self-motivation requires developing a strong internal dialogue. Most people have an internal critic that focuses on what's wrong, what's missing, or what's difficult. Self-motivated people have learned to cultivate an internal coach that focuses on what's possible, what's improving, and what's within their control. They speak to themselves with the same encouragement and support they would offer a good friend facing similar challenges. Self-motivation is also about learning to find energy in the process rather than just the outcome. When you can appreciate the journey of growth, learning, and development, You don't need external rewards to sustain your effort. You find satisfaction in the daily practice of improvement. You enjoy the challenge of becoming better than you were yesterday. This process-oriented approach to motivation is more sustainable because it's available every day, not just when you achieve major milestones. Developing self-motivation requires accepting responsibility for your emotional state. Instead of believing that your motivation depends on external circumstances, you recognize that it's something you create and maintain. You stop waiting for the right conditions to feel motivated and start creating motivation regardless of conditions. You become someone who generates energy rather than someone who waits for energy to come to them. The ultimate goal of mastering self-motivation is to become psychologically independent. You're no longer at the mercy of others' moods, recognition, or support. You've developed the ability to maintain enthusiasm and effort regardless of external circumstances. This independence doesn't make you cold or disconnected. It makes you more valuable in relationships because you're contributing from strength rather than need. Remember, self-motivation is a skill that develops over time through practice. Start by connecting your daily actions to your deeper values. Develop internal feedback systems that recognize your progress. Create rituals that generate energy and focus. Practice taking action when you don't feel like it. Over time, you'll develop the ability to generate motivation from within, making you someone who can maintain progress and momentum regardless of external support or recognition. Chapter 4. Develop emotional independence. Emotional independence is the ability to maintain your emotional equilibrium regardless of external circumstances or other people's behavior. It's not about becoming emotionally numb or disconnected. It's about developing the strength to feel your emotions fully while not being controlled by them or dependent on others to regulate them for you. This skill is crucial for winning alone because it allows you to maintain clarity, make sound decisions, and stay focused on your goals even when external support is absent or when others are actively opposing your efforts. Most people are emotionally dependent without realizing it. Their mood depends on how others treat them. Their confidence fluctuates based on external validation. Their sense of worth rises and falls with others' opinions. Their emotional state is essentially controlled by factors outside themselves, making them vulnerable to manipulation and inconsistency. Emotional independence means taking full responsibility for your emotional experience and developing the skills to manage it effectively. The foundation of emotional independence is self-awareness. You need to understand your emotional patterns, triggers, and responses. What situations consistently affect your mood? Which types of people or comments tend to throw you off balance? How do you typically react when stressed, criticized, or disappointed? This awareness allows you to anticipate emotional challenges and prepare appropriate responses rather than being caught off guard by your own reactions. Emotional independence requires developing the ability to self-soothe. Instead of relying on others to comfort you when you're upset, validate you when you're insecure, or calm you when you're anxious, you learn to provide these emotional services for yourself. This might involve breathing techniques, meditation, physical exercise, journaling, or simply learning to sit with uncomfortable emotions without immediately trying to escape or fix them. One of the most important aspects of emotional independence is learning to separate your worth from others' treatment of you. How others behave toward you says more about them than about you. Their criticism might reflect their own insecurities. Their lack of support might indicate their own limitations. Their negativity might stem from their own struggles. When you understand this, You stop taking others' behavior personally and maintain your emotional stability regardless of how they treat you. Emotional independence also means developing the courage to feel difficult emotions without immediately seeking external comfort. Most people are so uncomfortable with feelings like loneliness, fear, sadness, or anxiety that they'll do anything to avoid or escape these emotions. But emotional independence requires the willingness to experience the full range of human emotions without being overwhelmed by them or dependent on others to manage them. This doesn't mean suppressing emotions or pretending they don't exist. It means developing the capacity to feel emotions fully while maintaining perspective and choice about how to respond. You can feel angry without acting destructively. You can feel sad without becoming depressed. You can feel afraid without becoming paralyzed. You can feel lonely without becoming desperate for company. Emotional independence requires setting clear boundaries with others. This means not taking responsibility for managing others' emotions while also not expecting others to manage yours. You can offer support and empathy without becoming emotionally entangled in others' problems. You can receive feedback and criticism without internalizing others' judgments about your worth. Developing emotional independence also involves learning to validate yourself rather than constantly seeking validation from others. You learn to recognize your own growth, acknowledge your own efforts, and appreciate your own qualities. You develop an internal source of encouragement and support that doesn't depend on external recognition or approval. One practical aspect of emotional independence is learning to make decisions based on your values and goals rather than your emotions. Emotions provide important information, but they shouldn't be the primary driver of your choices. You can feel scared about taking a risk while still choosing to take it if it aligns with your goals. You can feel disappointed about a setback while still choosing to persist toward your objective. Emotional independence requires developing emotional resilience, which is the ability to bounce back from emotional challenges without being permanently affected. This involves learning from difficult experiences rather than being traumatized by them, maintaining perspective during emotional storms, and developing the confidence that you can handle whatever emotions arise. The practice of emotional independence involves daily attention to your emotional state without being controlled by it. You check in with yourself regularly. How am I feeling? What's driving these emotions? What do I need right now? How can I best care for myself? This isn't self-obsession, it's self-management. It's taking responsibility for your emotional well-being rather than making it someone else's responsibility. Emotional independence also means learning to enjoy your own company. Many people are so uncomfortable with solitude because they're uncomfortable with their own thoughts and feelings. But when you develop emotional independence, you can spend time alone without feeling lonely, make decisions without consensus, and find contentment without external entertainment or validation. The goal of emotional independence isn't to become emotionally invulnerable or disconnected from others. It's to become emotionally stable and self-sufficient so that you can engage with others from a position of strength rather than need. You can offer genuine love and support because you're not desperately seeking it. You can maintain healthy relationships because you're not depending on others to complete you emotionally. Remember, emotional independence is developed gradually through practice and self-reflection. Start by paying attention to your emotional patterns and triggers. Practice self-soothing techniques when you're upset. Set boundaries with people who consistently drain your emotional energy. Learn to validate yourself rather than constantly seeking external approval. Over time, you'll develop the emotional strength to maintain your equilibrium regardless of external circumstances. making you someone who can truly win alone. Chapter 5. Create private systems that keep you moving. Private systems are the invisible structures that support your progress when external motivation is absent. They're the personal routines, habits, and processes you develop to maintain momentum regardless of circumstances. These systems operate independently of other people's involvement, recognition, or support, making them essential for anyone who wants to achieve sustained success without depending on external factors. The power of private systems lies in their consistency and reliability. While external motivation fluctuates based on other people's moods, availability, and interests, private systems function regardless of external conditions. They provide structure when life feels chaotic, momentum when energy is low, and direction when the path seems unclear. They're the difference between people who maintain progress consistently and those whose efforts rise and fall with their circumstances. Creating effective private systems requires understanding the psychology of habit formation and behavior change. The most successful systems are built on principles that make desired behaviors easier and undesired behaviors harder. They work with your natural psychological tendencies rather than against them. They're designed to function even when motivation is low, energy is depleted, or external support is unavailable. The foundation of any private system is clarity about your objectives and values. You can't create effective systems without knowing what you're trying to achieve and why it matters to you. Your systems should be designed to move you consistently toward your goals while reinforcing the values that guide your decisions. This alignment ensures that your daily actions are building the life you actually want rather than just keeping you busy. Morning routines are one of the most powerful private systems because they set the tone for your entire day. A well-designed morning routine ensures that you start each day with intention, energy, and focus regardless of what happened the day before or what challenges lie ahead. Your morning routine might include exercise, meditation, planning, reading, or journaling. The specific activities matter less than their consistency and their alignment with your goals and values. Evening routines are equally important because they help you process the day's events, prepare for the next day, and transition into rest. An effective evening routine might include reviewing your progress, planning tomorrow's priorities, reflecting on lessons learned, or simply creating space for relaxation and recovery. These routines help you maintain perspective and continuity even when individual days feel challenging or unproductive. Tracking systems are another crucial component of private systems. You need ways to monitor your progress that don't depend on external recognition or feedback. This might involve keeping a journal of your daily actions, maintaining charts of key metrics, or simply checking off completed tasks. The act of tracking itself often improves performance because it creates awareness and accountability even when no one else is watching. Private systems should also include decision-making frameworks that help you choose wisely when facing common dilemmas. For example, you might develop criteria for deciding which opportunities to pursue, which commitments to make, or how to spend your discretionary time. Having pre-established frameworks reduces decision fatigue and helps ensure that your choices align with your priorities even when you're tired or stressed. Effective private systems include both productive routines and recovery routines. It's not enough to have systems that drive you forward. You also need systems that help you rest, recharge, and maintain perspective. This might include weekly reviews, monthly assessments, or regular breaks from intensive work. Balance isn't just important for well-being. It's essential for sustainable performance. Your private systems should be designed to function in various circumstances. They need to work when you're at home and when you're traveling, when you have plenty of time and when you're rushed, when you feel motivated and when you don't. This requires building flexibility into your systems while maintaining their essential elements. You might have full versions for ideal conditions and minimal versions for challenging circumstances. Private systems also need to evolve as you grow and your circumstances change. What works at one stage of your life or career might need adjustment as you face new challenges or pursue different goals. Regular review and refinement of your systems ensures they continue to serve your evolving needs rather than becoming rigid routines that no longer align with your objectives. The key to successful private systems is starting small and building gradually. It's better to have a simple system that you follow consistently than a complex system that you abandon when life gets challenging. Begin with 1 or 2 core habits and gradually add elements as they become automatic. This approach builds momentum and confidence while avoiding the overwhelm that often leads to abandoning new systems entirely. Private systems should also include methods for handling setbacks and disruptions. Life will interfere with your routines occasionally, and effective systems include strategies for getting back on track quickly rather than allowing temporary disruptions to become permanent departures. This might involve simplified versions of your routines for difficult periods or specific protocols for restarting after interruptions. The psychological benefit of private systems extends beyond their practical utility. Having reliable systems builds confidence because you know you can maintain progress regardless of circumstances. They provide a sense of control in an unpredictable world. They create stability and structure that supports both performance and well-being. They demonstrate to yourself that you're serious about your goals and committed to your growth. Remember, the most powerful systems are often the simplest ones. They don't need to be elaborate or impressive. They need to be sustainable and effective. Focus on creating systems that you can maintain consistently rather than systems that look perfect on paper but fail in practice. Your private systems are tools for achieving your goals, not goals in themselves. Design them to serve your objectives and adjust them as needed to maintain their effectiveness over time. Chapter 6. Learn to trust your own judgment. Trusting your own judgment is one of the most critical skills for psychological independence, yet it's something most people struggle with their entire lives. They second-guess themselves constantly, seeking validation for decisions they're perfectly capable of making on their own. They poll friends, family, and strangers on social media about choices that only they can truly evaluate. This constant external consultation weakens their decision-making muscle and creates a dependency that undermines their ability to navigate life confidently and independently. The inability to trust your own judgment often stems from past experiences where you made mistakes or faced criticism for your decisions. Maybe you chose poorly in a relationship, made a financial error, or pursued a path that didn't work out as planned. These experiences can create doubt about your decision-making abilities, leading you to seek external validation as a form of protection against future mistakes. But this protection comes at a cost. It prevents you from developing the very skill you need most. Trusting your judgment doesn't mean believing you'll never make mistakes. It means accepting that making your own mistakes is better than living someone else's life perfectly. Your mistakes teach you lessons that are specifically relevant to your situation, values, and goals. When you constantly defer to others' opinions, you miss these learning opportunities and remain dependent on external guidance for situations that only you fully understand. The foundation of good judgment is self-knowledge. You need to understand your values, priorities, strengths, weaknesses, and goals before you can make decisions that truly serve your best interests. Most people struggle with decision-making not because they lack intelligence, but because they lack clarity about what they actually want and why they want it. When you know yourself deeply, decisions become easier because you have clear criteria for evaluation. Developing trust in your judgment requires starting with smaller, lower-stakes decisions and building your confidence gradually. Instead of seeking advice about what to wear, where to eat, or how to spend your weekend, make these choices independently and notice how they turn out. Pay attention to your decision-making process. What factors do you consider? How do you weigh different options? What feels right intuitively versus what seems logical analytically? One of the biggest obstacles to trusting your judgment is the fear of other people's disapproval. You worry that if you make a choice others disagree with, you'll face criticism, rejection, or social consequences. This fear leads many people to make decisions designed to please others rather than serve their own best interests. But seeking approval through your choices is a form of self-betrayal that ultimately leads to resentment and regret. Learning to trust your judgment also means accepting that you have access to information about your situation that others don't have. You know your financial situation, your relationship dynamics, your career aspirations, your health concerns, and your personal history in ways that even your closest advisors cannot fully understand. This insider knowledge makes you uniquely qualified to make decisions about your own life, even if others have more experience or expertise in general. The practice of trusting your judgment involves learning to distinguish between seeking advice and seeking approval. Seeking advice means gathering information and perspectives to help you make a better decision while maintaining responsibility for the final choice. Seeking approval means looking for someone else to validate a decision you've already made or to make the decision for you. The first approach strengthens your judgment. The second weakens it. Developing good judgment also requires learning to sit with uncertainty and ambiguity. Most decisions involve incomplete information and unknown outcomes. People who struggle to trust their judgment often seek more information or more opinions, hoping to eliminate uncertainty before making a choice. But this approach often leads to analysis paralysis and missed opportunities. Learning to make good decisions with imperfect information is a crucial skill for independence. Your judgment improves through practice and reflection. After making decisions, pay attention to how they turn out. What went well? What could you have considered more carefully? What patterns do you notice in your decision-making? This reflection helps you learn from experience and refine your judgment over time. It also builds confidence as you notice that your decisions generally serve your interests well, even when they don't turn out perfectly. Trusting your judgment also means learning to live with the consequences of your choices without constant regret or second-guessing. Every decision involves trade-offs, and even good decisions sometimes lead to difficult outcomes due to factors beyond your control. The ability to accept responsibility for your choices and learn from their consequences without being paralyzed by regret is essential for maintaining confidence in your decision-making abilities. One practical way to build trust in your judgment is to develop decision-making frameworks that reflect your values and priorities. These frameworks help you evaluate options consistently and make choices that align with your long-term interests. For example, you might always consider how a decision affects your health, relationships, financial stability, and personal growth. Having clear criteria makes decision-making more systematic and builds confidence in your choices. Learning to trust your judgment also involves recognizing the difference between intuition and impulse. Intuition is the unconscious processing of information and experience that leads to insights about what's right for you. Impulse is the immediate desire for gratification without consideration of long-term consequences. Both can feel like internal guidance, but they lead to very different outcomes. Learning to distinguish between them helps you make decisions that serve your long-term interests. The goal isn't to become completely self-reliant in decision-making or to ignore valuable input from others. The goal is to develop enough confidence in your judgment that you can consider others' perspectives without being dependent on their approval. You can seek advice while maintaining responsibility for your choices. You can consider criticism without internalizing it as truth about your worth or capabilities. Trusting your judgment also means accepting that some people won't understand or support your decisions, and that's okay. Your choices don't need to make sense to everyone. They need to make sense to you. When you base decisions on your own assessment of what's right, rather than what's popular or expected, you develop authentic confidence that can't be shaken by others' disapproval. The ultimate benefit of trusting your own judgment is freedom. Freedom from the exhausting process of constantly seeking external validation. Freedom from the resentment that comes from living according to others' expectations. Freedom from the paralysis that comes from fear of making mistakes. When you trust your judgment, you become someone who can make decisions quickly and confidently, adapt to changing circumstances, and take responsibility for your life's direction. Remember, building trust in your judgment is a gradual process that requires patience and self-compassion. You'll make mistakes, and sometimes others' advice would have led to better outcomes. But the confidence and independence you develop by learning to trust yourself are worth more than the safety of always deferring to others. Start with small decisions, reflect on your choices, and gradually take on bigger decisions as your confidence grows. Over time, you'll develop the judgment and self-trust that allow you to navigate life independently and authentically. Chapter 7. Stop seeking approval for your path. The need for approval is one of the most limiting psychological patterns that keeps people from achieving their full potential. When you constantly seek others' validation for your choices, dreams, and direction, you give away your power to people who may not understand your vision, share your values, or want what's best for you. This approval-seeking behavior creates a life lived in reaction to others' expectations rather than in alignment with your authentic desires and capabilities. Most people develop approval-seeking behaviors early in life as a survival mechanism. Children naturally seek approval from parents, teachers, and peers because acceptance often determines access to resources, safety, and belonging. This pattern becomes problematic when it continues into adulthood, where the pursuit of approval often conflicts with the pursuit of authenticity and achievement. Adult success frequently requires making choices that others don't understand or support. The psychology behind approval-seeking is rooted in the fear of rejection and the misconception that others' opinions determine your worth. When you believe that your value as a person depends on others' approval, every criticism feels like a threat to your identity, and every rejection feels like evidence of your inadequacy. This creates a cycle where you modify your behavior, goals, and choices to gain acceptance, gradually moving further away from your authentic self. One of the most destructive aspects of approval-seeking is that it's never fully satisfied. Even when you receive the approval you're seeking, it's temporary and conditional. People's opinions change, their attention moves elsewhere, and their support depends on factors beyond your control. This means that approval-based validation is inherently unstable, keeping you in a constant state of anxiety about maintaining others' positive regard. The path to psychological independence requires recognizing that seeking approval and achieving excellence are often incompatible goals. Excellence requires taking risks, making unpopular choices, enduring criticism, and persisting through periods when others doubt your direction. If you need constant approval, you'll avoid the very behaviors that lead to exceptional results. You'll choose safety over growth, conformity over innovation, and acceptance over achievement. Breaking free from approval seeking begins with understanding that other people's opinions about your path are largely irrelevant. They don't have to live with the consequences of your choices. You do. They don't understand the full context of your situation, capabilities, and aspirations. You do. They're viewing your life through the lens of their own experiences, limitations, and biases. You're living it from the inside. This makes their approval or disapproval largely meaningless as a guide for your decisions. The fear of disapproval often stems from catastrophic thinking about the consequences of others' negative opinions. You imagine that criticism will lead to rejection, isolation, or failure. But in reality, most people are too focused on their own lives to spend much time judging yours. Those who do criticize your choices often do so from their own insecurities or limitations. Learning to see criticism as information about the critic, rather than truth about you, helps reduce its emotional impact. Stopping the pursuit of approval requires developing internal sources of validation. Instead of seeking external confirmation that you're on the right path, you need to develop the ability to assess your progress against your own standards and values. This means celebrating your growth, acknowledging your efforts, and recognizing your achievements without needing others to validate them first. One practical approach to reducing approval seeking is to practice making decisions without consulting others when their input isn't truly necessary. Start with small choices like what to wear, what to eat, or how to spend your free time. Notice the urge to seek validation and resist it. Pay attention to how these independent decisions feel and how they turn out. This practice builds confidence in your ability to choose wisely without external input. The process of breaking free from approval seeking also involves examining whose approval you're seeking and why. Often, people seek validation from individuals whose opinions shouldn't carry much weight in their lives. You might find yourself caring more about acquaintances' opinions than your closest friends' support, or seeking approval from people whose lives and choices you don't actually respect. Recognizing these patterns helps you redirect your attention to sources of feedback that are actually valuable. Learning to accept disapproval as a natural part of pursuing excellence is crucial for psychological independence. Every significant achievement involves making choices that some people won't understand or support. Innovation requires challenging existing ideas. Leadership requires making unpopular decisions. Growth requires leaving comfort zones that others want you to share with them. Disapproval isn't evidence that you're wrong. It's often evidence that you're doing something significant. Developing comfort with disapproval doesn't mean becoming indifferent to others or deliberately seeking conflict. It means accepting that you can't control others' opinions and shouldn't let their potential disapproval prevent you from pursuing your authentic path. You can remain considerate and respectful while making choices that others don't understand or support. The practice of not seeking approval also involves learning to share your plans and progress selectively. Not everyone needs to know about your goals, and not everyone's opinion about them is valuable. Sharing your aspirations with people who don't understand or support them often leads to discouragement and doubt. Learning to keep your own counsel and share your journey only with those who genuinely support your growth protects your motivation and confidence. One of the most liberating realizations is that the people whose approval you're seeking often aren't living the kind of life you want to live. They may be satisfied with mediocrity, afraid of risk, or limited by their own beliefs about what's possible. Seeking approval from people who haven't achieved what you want to achieve is like asking for directions from someone who's never been where you want to go. Breaking free from approval seeking also requires accepting responsibility for your choices and their consequences. When you make decisions based on others' approval, you can blame them if things don't work out. When you make decisions based on your own judgment, you have to accept full responsibility for the outcomes. This responsibility can feel frightening, but it's also empowering because it means you have control over your life's direction. The ultimate goal isn't to become completely indifferent to others' opinions or to avoid all feedback. Constructive feedback from people you respect can be valuable for growth and improvement. The goal is to become selective about whose opinions matter to you and to base your major life decisions on your own assessment of what's right rather than what's popular or expected. Remember, the approval you're seeking from others is often something you need to give yourself first. When you approve of your own choices, when you validate your own progress, when you support your own dreams, others' opinions become much less important. You stop seeking external validation because you've developed a reliable internal source. This shift transforms you from someone who reacts to others' expectations into someone who acts from authentic conviction, making you truly capable of winning alone. Chapter 8. Build mental strength through solitude. Solitude is one of the most powerful tools for building mental strength, yet most people avoid it like the plague. They fill every quiet moment with distractions, surround themselves with constant noise, and feel uncomfortable when left alone with their thoughts. This avoidance of solitude weakens their psychological foundation because it prevents them from developing the inner resources necessary for true independence and resilience. Mental strength isn't built in crowds. It's forged in the quiet spaces where you face yourself without external distractions. The difference between loneliness and solitude is crucial to understand. Loneliness is the painful feeling of being disconnected from others, often accompanied by sadness, anxiety, or desperation for company. Solitude is the intentional practice of spending time alone for reflection, growth, and inner development. Loneliness is something that happens to you. Solitude is something you choose. One weakens you, the other strengthens you. Modern society has created a culture that's afraid of silence and uncomfortable with introspection. We're constantly connected, perpetually entertained, and continuously stimulated. This external focus prevents many people from developing the internal awareness and strength that comes from regular periods of solitude. Without time alone with their thoughts, they never learn to understand themselves, process their experiences, or develop their own perspectives independent of external influences. Solitude provides the mental space necessary for deep thinking and genuine creativity. When you're constantly interacting with others or consuming external content, your mind is primarily in reactive mode, responding to inputs rather than generating original thoughts. Solitude allows your mind to shift into generative mode, where you can process experiences, make connections, solve problems, and develop insights that aren't possible when you're constantly externally focused. The practice of solitude also develops emotional regulation skills that are essential for mental strength. When you're alone with difficult emotions like anxiety, sadness, or frustration, You're forced to develop healthy ways of managing them, rather than immediately seeking external comfort or distraction. This builds emotional resilience and self-sufficiency that serves you well when facing challenges that you must handle independently. Building mental strength through solitude requires learning to sit with discomfort without immediately trying to escape it. Most people's first instinct, when faced with uncomfortable thoughts or feelings, is to reach for their phone, turn on entertainment, or seek out company. But true mental strength comes from the ability to remain present with whatever arises internally, whether it's pleasant or unpleasant. This tolerance for discomfort is what allows you to persist through challenges that would cause others to quit. Solitude also provides the opportunity for honest self-assessment that's impossible when you're constantly managing your image for others. When you're alone, you can drop the masks you wear in social situations and examine your authentic thoughts, feelings, motivations, and behaviors. This self-awareness is essential for growth because you can't improve what you don't acknowledge, and it's difficult to be honest about your shortcomings when you're worried about how others will perceive you. The quality of your solitude matters more than the quantity. Simply being physically alone while scrolling through social media or consuming entertainment isn't true solitude. It's just solo consumption. Meaningful solitude involves disconnecting from external inputs and turning your attention inward. This might involve meditation, journaling, walking in nature, or simply sitting quietly with your thoughts. The key is creating space for internal processing and reflection. Regular solitude also develops your ability to enjoy your own company, which is essential for psychological independence. People who are uncomfortable being alone often make poor relationship choices because they prioritize companionship over compatibility. They may stay in unhealthy relationships or seek validation from inappropriate sources simply to avoid being alone. When you genuinely enjoy your own company, you can be more selective about the relationships you pursue and maintain. Solitude provides the mental clarity necessary for making important decisions. When you're constantly influenced by others' opinions, emotions, and agendas, it's difficult to discern your own authentic desires and values. Time alone allows you to filter out external noise and connect with your inner wisdom. Many of life's most important decisions require this kind of clarity, and it's only available through periods of undistracted introspection. The practice of solitude also builds confidence in your ability to handle whatever life brings. When you've spent time alone processing difficult emotions, facing uncomfortable truths, and working through challenging problems, you develop trust in your ability to cope independently. This confidence is invaluable when facing crises or transitions that require you to rely primarily on your own resources. Building mental strength through solitude doesn't mean becoming antisocial or avoiding all human connection. It means developing the internal resources that allow you to engage with others from a position of strength rather than need. When you're comfortable with solitude, you don't need constant company to feel okay about yourself. You can contribute to relationships rather than just taking from them. You can be present with others because you're not desperately seeking validation or distraction. One of the most profound benefits of regular solitude is the development of inner peace. When you're no longer afraid of being alone with your thoughts, when you've processed your difficult emotions rather than avoiding them, when you've made peace with your imperfections and uncertainties, you develop a sense of inner calm that external circumstances can't easily disturb. This peace becomes a foundation for mental strength that supports you through all of life's challenges. The practice of solitude also connects you with your authentic voice and vision. When you're constantly influenced by others' perspectives, it's easy to lose touch with your own dreams, values, and aspirations. Regular time alone helps you distinguish between what you genuinely want and what you think you should want based on external expectations. This clarity is essential for building a life that truly satisfies you rather than just impressing others. Developing comfort with solitude requires gradual practice, especially if you're accustomed to constant stimulation and company. Start with short periods of undistracted alone time and gradually increase the duration as you become more comfortable. Notice your impulse to reach for distractions and practice sitting with whatever arises instead. Pay attention to the insights, emotions, and ideas that emerge when you give them space to surface. The goal isn't to become a hermit or to avoid all social interaction. The goal is to develop the mental strength and self-awareness that come from regular periods of intentional solitude. When you're comfortable being alone, when you enjoy your own company, when you can process your experiences and emotions independently, you become someone who doesn't need external validation or constant company to feel whole and confident. Remember, mental strength isn't built through external achievements or social recognition. It's built through the internal work of self-understanding, emotional regulation, and authentic self-acceptance. Solitude provides the space necessary for this work. By embracing regular periods of intentional alone time, you develop the psychological independence and resilience that allow you to navigate life's challenges with confidence and clarity, regardless of external support or circumstances. Chapter 9. Stop explaining yourself to people who don't get it. One of the most exhausting and counterproductive habits that undermines psychological independence is the compulsion to explain yourself to people who fundamentally don't understand your vision, values, or direction. This need to justify your choices to everyone drains your energy, dilutes your focus, and often leads to self-doubt as you try to articulate decisions that make perfect sense to you but seem foreign to others. Learning to stop explaining yourself to people who don't get it is essential for maintaining clarity, confidence, and momentum on your path. The urge to explain yourself often stems from a desire to be understood and accepted, which are natural human needs. However, this desire becomes problematic when you feel compelled to justify every decision to people whose understanding isn't necessary for your success or well-being. Not everyone needs to understand your choices, and their lack of understanding doesn't invalidate your decisions or reflect poorly on your judgment. The reality is that some people will never understand your path because they're looking at it through the lens of their own experiences, limitations, and fears. Someone who has never taken risks won't understand your entrepreneurial aspirations. Someone who prioritizes security above all else won't understand your pursuit of creative fulfillment. Someone who fears change won't understand your desire for growth and transformation. Their inability to understand isn't a flaw in your vision. It's a reflection of their different perspective and priorities. Explaining yourself to people who don't get it often backfires because it can actually strengthen their opposition to your choices. When you feel compelled to justify your decisions, you may come across as uncertain or defensive, which can reinforce others' doubts about your path. Additionally, the more you explain, the more opportunities you give them to poke holes in your reasoning or offer unsolicited advice based on their limited understanding of your situation. The energy you spend explaining yourself to skeptics is energy that could be better invested in executing your plans. Every hour spent defending your choices is an hour not spent implementing them. Every conversation focused on justifying your direction is a conversation that doesn't move you forward. This misallocation of energy slows your progress and can create doubt about decisions that were sound before you started second-guessing them through others' eyes. Learning to stop explaining yourself requires developing comfort with being misunderstood. This is challenging because most people have a deep need to be seen and understood by others. However, being understood by everyone is neither possible nor necessary. What matters is being understood by yourself and by the people whose opinions genuinely matter in your life. The approval of people who don't share your values or understand your vision is ultimately meaningless. One of the most liberating realizations is that you don't owe anyone an explanation for your life choices. You're not required to justify your career decisions to relatives who chose different paths. You don't need to explain your lifestyle choices to friends who made different priorities. You don't have to defend your goals to people who have settled for less than they wanted. Your life is yours to live, and their confusion about your choices is their problem to solve, not yours to fix. The people who truly matter in your life, those who love and support you, may not always understand your specific choices, but they'll respect your right to make them. They'll trust your judgment even when they don't fully grasp your reasoning. They'll support your pursuit of what makes you happy even if it's not what would make them happy. These are the people whose questions deserve thoughtful answers, not because you owe them explanations, but because their understanding enhances your relationship and their support aids your journey. Stopping the habit of over-explanation also requires recognizing the difference between sharing your vision with interested parties and defending it against skeptics. Sharing involves communicating with people who are genuinely curious about your path and might benefit from understanding your perspective. Defending involves trying to convince people who have already decided that your choices are wrong or misguided. The first is productive. The second is wasteful. When you do choose to explain your decisions, focus on the people who have demonstrated genuine interest in understanding rather than judging. These might be mentors, close friends, family members who support your growth, or peers who are on similar journeys. These conversations can be valuable for clarifying your thinking, receiving useful feedback, and building stronger relationships with people who matter to you. Learning to respond appropriately to unsolicited criticism or questioning is crucial for maintaining your psychological independence. Instead of launching into detailed explanations, you can simply acknowledge their perspective without accepting it as truth. Phrases like, "I understand that's how you see it," or "I appreciate your concern," allow you to be respectful without being defensive or explanatory. The practice of not explaining yourself also involves learning to sit with others' disappointment or disapproval without feeling compelled to fix it. People may be disappointed that you're not living up to their expectations or following their advice. That disappointment belongs to them. You don't have to take responsibility for managing their emotions about your choices. One effective strategy for reducing over-explanation is to develop standard responses to common criticisms or questions about your path. Having prepared responses prevents you from getting drawn into lengthy justifications and helps you maintain boundaries around discussions of your personal choices. These responses should be polite but firm, acknowledging the other person without inviting further debate. The goal isn't to become dismissive of all feedback or to ignore valuable perspectives from people who understand your situation. The goal is to become selective about when and to whom you explain your choices. You can listen to feedback without feeling obligated to justify your decisions. You can consider others' perspectives without needing their approval before moving forward. Learning to stop explaining yourself also builds confidence in your decision-making abilities. When you're constantly justifying your choices to others, You implicitly suggest that their approval is necessary for your decisions to be valid. When you make choices confidently without feeling the need to explain them to everyone, you demonstrate faith in your own judgment and strengthen your psychological independence. The people who consistently demand explanations for your choices often do so from their own insecurity or need for control. They may feel threatened by your willingness to pursue paths they're afraid to consider. They may need you to stay small so they feel better about their own limitations. Recognizing these dynamics helps you understand that their demand for explanations often has more to do with their issues than with genuine concern for your well-being. Remember, the most successful and fulfilled people in history were often misunderstood by their contemporaries. Innovation requires going against conventional wisdom. Excellence requires making choices that average people don't understand. Growth requires leaving behind the safety of doing what everyone else expects. If you need everyone to understand your path before you pursue it, you'll end up living someone else's life instead of your own. The freedom that comes from not explaining yourself to people who don't get it is profound. You reclaim the energy you were spending on justification and redirect it toward execution. You maintain clarity about your vision instead of clouding it with others' doubts. You build confidence in your judgment instead of constantly second-guessing yourself. Most importantly, you start living authentically instead of performing for an audience that may never understand what you're trying to create. Chapter 10. Master the skill of internal dialogue. Your internal dialogue is the constant stream of thoughts, comments, and conversations you have with yourself throughout the day. This inner voice significantly influences your emotions, decisions, behavior, and overall mental state. Most people are largely unconscious of their internal dialogue, allowing it to run on autopilot without considering whether it's helping or hindering their progress. Mastering this internal conversation is crucial for psychological independence because it determines whether your mind works for you or against you in pursuing your goals. The quality of your internal dialogue directly affects your ability to perform under pressure, maintain motivation during difficult periods, and recover from setbacks. People with destructive internal dialogue constantly criticize themselves, predict negative outcomes, and reinforce limiting beliefs. Those with constructive internal dialogue encourage themselves, focus on possibilities, and maintain perspective during challenges. The difference between these two patterns often determines who succeeds and who gives up when facing adversity. Most people's internal dialogue is heavily influenced by external voices from their past. Critical parents, harsh teachers, dismissive peers, or negative cultural messages. These external voices become internalized over time, creating an inner critic that continues the criticism long after the original sources are gone. Breaking free from psychological dependence requires identifying these borrowed voices and replacing them with authentic, supportive internal dialogue that serves your current goals and values. The first step in mastering internal dialogue is developing awareness of what you're actually saying to yourself. Most people are shocked when they begin paying attention to their inner voice because they realize how negative, repetitive, or unhelpful it often is. You might discover that you constantly call yourself names, predict failure, or rehearse worst-case scenarios. This awareness is essential because you can't change what you don't notice. Developing a constructive internal dialogue doesn't mean becoming unrealistically positive or ignoring genuine problems. It means learning to speak to yourself with the same kindness, encouragement, and objectivity you would offer a good friend facing similar challenges. Instead of harsh self-criticism, you develop gentle self-correction. Instead of catastrophic predictions, you maintain realistic optimism. Instead of dwelling on what's wrong, you focus on what's possible. One of the most important aspects of healthy internal dialogue is learning to separate facts from interpretations. Your mind constantly creates stories about what events mean, why things happen, and what outcomes are likely. These interpretations often masquerade as facts, influencing your emotions and behavior based on assumptions rather than reality. Learning to distinguish between what actually happened and what you think it means helps you respond more rationally to challenges. Effective internal dialogue also involves learning to argue with unhelpful thoughts rather than automatically accepting them as truth. When your inner voice says, "I can't do this," or "this will never work," you can challenge these statements with questions like, "What evidence supports this belief?" Or, "Have I succeeded at difficult things before?" This mental discipline prevents negative thoughts from spiraling into defeating beliefs. The practice of positive self-talk isn't about mindless repetition of affirmations. It's about developing a realistic but encouraging internal voice that helps you navigate challenges effectively. This voice acknowledges difficulties while maintaining focus on solutions. It recognizes mistakes while emphasizing learning opportunities. It accepts current limitations while believing in future growth. Your internal dialogue also affects your relationship with failure and setbacks. People with destructive inner voices often catastrophize mistakes, turning minor setbacks into evidence of fundamental inadequacy. Those with healthy internal dialogue view failures as learning experiences, maintaining perspective about what setbacks actually mean for their long-term trajectory. This difference in internal response often determines who persists through challenges and who gives up prematurely. Mastering internal dialogue requires developing the ability to coach yourself through difficult situations. Instead of panicking when facing challenges, you learn to talk yourself through problems systematically. You ask productive questions like, "What do I need to focus on right now?" Or, "What would be most helpful in this situation?" This self-coaching ability makes you less dependent on external guidance and more capable of handling unexpected situations independently. The tone of your internal dialogue is as important as its content. You can say the right things to yourself in a harsh, critical tone that undermines their effectiveness. Or you can speak with genuine warmth and encouragement that builds confidence and resilience. Learning to adjust the emotional tone of your inner voice helps create an internal environment that supports growth rather than sabotaging it. Developing healthy internal dialogue also involves learning to celebrate your progress and acknowledge your efforts, not just your achievements. Most people's inner voice only speaks up to criticize mistakes or point out shortcomings. A balanced internal dialogue recognizes improvements, appreciates effort, and celebrates small wins along the way to larger goals. This internal recognition helps maintain motivation during periods when external validation is absent. Your internal dialogue significantly influences your stress levels and emotional regulation. When facing pressure, your inner voice can either escalate anxiety by focusing on everything that could go wrong, or it can provide calm guidance by focusing on what you can control. Learning to use internal dialogue as a tool for emotional regulation helps you maintain composure and clarity in challenging situations. The practice of mastering internal dialogue also involves learning to use self-talk as a performance enhancement tool. Athletes, performers, and other high achievers often develop specific internal dialogue patterns that help them perform at their best. This might involve focusing cues, confidence-building statements, or calming phrases that help manage performance anxiety and maintain focus under pressure. One crucial aspect of healthy internal dialogue is learning to be your own source of motivation and encouragement. Instead of relying on others to pump you up or provide inspiration, you develop the ability to motivate yourself through challenging periods. This internal motivation is more reliable than external sources because it's always available and specifically tailored to your situation and needs. The goal of mastering internal dialogue isn't to eliminate all negative thoughts or create unrealistic optimism. It's to develop a balanced, constructive inner voice that helps you navigate life's challenges effectively while maintaining psychological well-being. This voice acknowledges problems while focusing on solutions, recognizes limitations while believing in growth, and accepts mistakes while maintaining overall self-worth. Remember, your internal dialogue is one of the few things in life over which you have complete control. You can't control external circumstances, other people's behavior, or many of the challenges you'll face. But you can always choose how you speak to yourself about these experiences. This choice is one of your most powerful tools for building psychological independence and resilience. The person who masters their internal dialogue becomes capable of winning alone because they carry a supportive, encouraging presence with them wherever they go. They don't need external cheerleaders because they've developed the ability to coach themselves. They don't need constant validation because they've learned to recognize their own progress. They don't need others to believe in them because they've developed unshakable belief in themselves. This internal strength is what makes true independence possible. Chapter 11. Develop unshakable personal standards. Personal standards are the non-negotiable principles that govern how you behave, what you accept, and what you strive for, regardless of external circumstances or other people's expectations. They're the internal benchmarks that define who you are and who you're becoming. Most people allow their standards to fluctuate based on mood, convenience, or social pressure, which creates inconsistency in their character and undermines their ability to build lasting success. Developing unshakable personal standards is essential for psychological independence because it creates internal stability that doesn't depend on external validation or circumstances. The difference between people who achieve lasting success and those who remain inconsistent lies largely in their relationship with standards. Successful people have clear, unwavering expectations for themselves that they maintain regardless of whether anyone is watching, whether they feel motivated, or whether maintaining those standards is convenient. These standards become the foundation of their identity and the source of their internal strength. Most people confuse standards with goals, but they're fundamentally different. Goals are specific outcomes you want to achieve. Standards are the behaviors and principles you commit to maintaining regardless of outcomes. A goal might be to lose 20 pounds. A standard is to treat your body with respect through consistent, healthy choices. Goals can be achieved and then abandoned. Standards are maintained for life. Goals depend on external circumstances. Standards create internal consistency. Your personal standards determine the quality of your daily experience and the trajectory of your long-term development. If your standard is to give your best effort regardless of recognition, you'll build competence and self-respect even when others don't notice your work. If your standard is to speak truthfully, even when lies would be easier, you'll develop integrity and earn genuine trust. If your standard is to persist through difficulties without complaining, you'll build resilience and mental toughness. The process of developing unshakable standards begins with identifying what you truly value, not what you think you should value or what others expect you to value. Your standards must be authentic to you because you'll be the one maintaining them when external motivation is absent. Standards that are imposed by others or adopted to impress people rarely stick because they don't align with your genuine priorities and don't generate internal motivation. Unshakable standards are specific and measurable rather than vague and abstract. Instead of having a standard to be better, you might have standards like, I complete what I start. I speak respectfully, even when angry. Or, I invest time in learning every day. Specific standards make it clear when you're meeting your expectations and when you're falling short, eliminating the ambiguity that allows for rationalization and compromise. One of the most important characteristics of effective personal standards is that they're process-oriented rather than outcome-oriented. You can control your effort, behavior, and choices. You can't always control results, other people's responses, or external circumstances. Standards based on things within your control create consistency and build character. Standards based on uncontrollable factors create frustration and inconsistency. Maintaining high standards requires accepting that they'll sometimes be inconvenient, uncomfortable, or unpopular. There will be situations where lowering your standards would be easier, more profitable, or more socially acceptable. The test of your standards isn't whether you maintain them when it's easy. It's whether you maintain them when doing so requires sacrifice. This is where many people fail because they treat standards as suggestions rather than commitments. The development of unshakable standards also requires learning to recover quickly when you fall short rather than abandoning them entirely. Everyone fails to meet their standards sometimes. Perfectionism isn't the goal. The goal is to have standards that guide you back to your desired behavior quickly when you drift off course. This means viewing lapses as temporary setbacks rather than permanent failures. Your standards should evolve as you grow, but they shouldn't fluctuate based on temporary circumstances or emotions. As you develop greater capability and maturity, you might raise certain standards or add new ones. However, the core principles that define your character should remain stable regardless of what's happening around you. This stability creates the internal consistency that allows you to trust yourself and others to trust you. Personal standards also serve as a filter for relationships and opportunities. When you have clear standards for how you treat others and how you expect to be treated, you naturally attract people who respect those boundaries and repel those who don't. When you have standards for the type of work you'll do and how you'll do it, you attract opportunities that align with your values and avoid situations that would compromise your integrity. The practice of maintaining high standards requires daily attention and commitment. It's not enough to decide on your standards once. You need to recommit to them regularly and consciously choose to uphold them in each situation where they're relevant. This daily practice strengthens your character and makes maintaining standards increasingly automatic over time. One of the most powerful aspects of having unshakable standards is that they provide clarity in decision-making. When faced with choices, you can simply ask whether each option aligns with your standards. This eliminates much of the confusion and second-guessing that paralyzes people who don't have clear principles guiding their decisions. Standards serve as a reliable compass that points you in the right direction regardless of external pressures or temptations. Maintaining high standards also builds genuine self-confidence because it's based on your actual behavior rather than others' opinions. When you consistently act in alignment with your values, when you keep your commitments to yourself, when you maintain your principles under pressure, you develop unshakable confidence in your character. This confidence can't be taken away by criticism or setbacks because it's based on what you do, not what others think about what you do. The social benefits of having clear standards are often unexpected but significant. People respect those who have clear principles and stick to them consistently. They trust individuals whose behavior is predictable because it's guided by unwavering standards rather than changing moods or circumstances. This respect and trust create opportunities and relationships that aren't available to people who compromise their standards for short-term gains. Your standards also determine what you'll tolerate from yourself and others. People with low standards accept mediocre effort from themselves and poor treatment from others. People with high standards demand excellence from themselves and respectful treatment from others. This difference in tolerance levels significantly affects the quality of their experiences and relationships. The development of unshakable standards requires courage because it means you'll sometimes have to make unpopular choices, turn down tempting opportunities, or end relationships that don't align with your values. This courage comes from understanding that your standards aren't restrictions. They're the foundation of your freedom. They free you from the exhausting process of constantly deciding who to be and how to behave in each situation. One practical approach to developing standards is to identify areas where you currently lack consistency and establish clear expectations for your behavior in those areas. If you struggle with punctuality, you might establish a standard of arriving 5 minutes early to all commitments. If you tend to speak carelessly when angry, you might establish a standard of pausing before responding when emotions are high. The ultimate goal of developing unshakable personal standards isn't perfection. It's integrity. Integrity is the alignment between your values, words, and actions. When your behavior consistently reflects your stated principles, you develop the internal consistency that creates psychological independence. You become someone who doesn't need external validation because your self-worth is based on your adherence to your own standards rather than others' approval. Remember, your standards define who you are more than your achievements, possessions, or reputation. Achievements can be taken away, possessions can be lost, and reputations can be damaged. But your standards are always within your control. When you develop unshakable personal standards and commit to maintaining them regardless of circumstances, you create an internal foundation that supports you through all of life's challenges and changes. The person who has developed unshakable personal standards becomes capable of winning alone because they carry their own measuring stick with them wherever they go. They don't need others to define success for them because they have their own definition. They don't need external motivation to maintain excellence because their standards provide internal motivation. They don't need others' approval to feel good about themselves because they earn their own approval by living up to their own expectations. Chapter 12. Practice self-reliance in small daily actions. Self-reliance isn't built through grand gestures or dramatic moments of independence. It's developed through countless small daily actions that demonstrate your ability to meet your own needs, solve your own problems, and take care of yourself without depending on others. These seemingly insignificant choices accumulate over time to create deep confidence in your ability to handle whatever life presents. The person who practices self-reliance in small things builds the foundation for independence in larger matters. Most people underestimate the psychological impact of their daily dependencies. They automatically reach out for help with minor inconveniences, seek others' opinions on trivial decisions, or avoid tasks they could easily learn to do themselves. While none of these individual dependencies seem significant, collectively they reinforce a mindset of reliance on others and weaken confidence in personal capabilities. Each time you choose dependency over self-reliance, you send yourself a subtle message that you can't handle things on your own. The practice of self-reliance begins with awareness of your automatic tendencies to seek external help or validation for things you could handle independently. Before calling someone for advice, asking for help with a task, or seeking reassurance about a decision, pause and ask yourself, could I figure this out on my own? Often, the answer is yes, but the habit of external reliance prevents you from even attempting independent action. Self-reliance in daily actions doesn't mean refusing all help or never seeking input from others. It means choosing independence when it's reasonable and beneficial for your growth, while still being open to assistance when it's genuinely needed or valuable. The goal is to develop the default assumption that you can handle most situations yourself, with external support being an option rather than an automatic necessity. One of the most important areas for practicing self-reliance is problem solving. Instead of immediately asking others how to handle challenges, develop the habit of thinking through problems independently first. Consider different approaches, research solutions, and attempt to resolve issues yourself before seeking external input. This practice builds confidence in your problem-solving abilities and reduces the anxiety that comes from feeling helpless when facing obstacles. Physical self-reliance is another crucial area for development. Learning basic maintenance skills, cooking nutritious meals, managing your finances, and taking care of your health are fundamental aspects of adult independence. Each skill you master reduces your dependence on others and increases your confidence in your ability to take care of yourself. This confidence extends beyond the specific skills into a general sense of capability and self-sufficiency. Emotional self-reliance involves developing the ability to manage your emotional states without constantly seeking external comfort or validation. Instead of immediately reaching out to others when you're upset, anxious, or frustrated, practice sitting with these emotions and finding healthy ways to process them independently. This doesn't mean isolating yourself emotionally. It means developing internal resources for emotional regulation that don't depend on others' availability or willingness to provide support. The practice of self-reliance also extends to entertainment and stimulation. Instead of always needing others' company to enjoy yourself or external entertainment to avoid boredom, develop the ability to find satisfaction in solitary activities. Read books, pursue hobbies, exercise, create something, or simply enjoy quiet contemplation. This capacity for self-entertainment reduces social dependence and increases comfort with solitude. Information gathering is another area where self-reliance can be practiced daily. Instead of asking others for information, you could easily research yourself. Develop the habit of finding answers independently. This not only builds research skills, but also increases your confidence in your ability to learn and understand new topics without relying on others' interpretations or explanations. Decision-making offers constant opportunities to practice self-reliance. For routine decisions like what to wear, what to eat, how to spend free time, or which route to take, resist the urge to seek input from others unless their preferences directly affect them. These small decisions build your confidence in your judgment and reduce the mental energy spent seeking validation for choices that only affect you. The maintenance of your living space is another important area for self-reliance. Learning to clean, organize, repair minor problems, and create a comfortable environment for yourself demonstrates your ability to take care of your basic needs independently. This practical competence contributes to a sense of capability that extends to other areas of life. Practicing self-reliance in daily actions also involves learning to celebrate your own achievements without needing external recognition. Instead of immediately sharing every success or accomplishment with others, develop the ability to feel satisfied with your progress and proud of your efforts without external validation. This internal recognition builds genuine self-confidence that doesn't depend on others' approval. Self-reliance in communication means expressing your thoughts and feelings directly, rather than hoping others will guess your needs or preferences. Instead of dropping hints or expecting others to read your mind, practice clear, direct communication about what you want and need. This clarity reduces misunderstandings and demonstrates respect for both yourself and others. The practice of self-reliance extends to learning and skill development. Instead of always seeking instruction from others, develop the ability to learn new things through reading, experimentation, and practice. While teachers and mentors can be valuable, the confidence that comes from knowing you can acquire new knowledge and skills independently is irreplaceable. Financial self-reliance starts with daily money management decisions. Track your expenses, understand your budget, make informed purchasing decisions, and gradually build financial knowledge and independence. Each financially responsible choice builds confidence in your ability to manage your resources and reduces anxiety about your financial future. Time management is another crucial area for self-reliance practice. Instead of always accommodating others' schedules or depending on external reminders and motivation, develop your own systems for managing time effectively. Plan your days, set your own deadlines, and maintain your schedule without constant external accountability. The psychological benefits of practicing self-reliance in small daily actions are cumulative and profound. Each independent action builds confidence in your capabilities. Each problem solved independently increases trust in your resourcefulness. Each need met through your own efforts strengthens your sense of personal power and reduces anxiety about your ability to handle future challenges. This daily practice of self-reliance also prepares you for larger challenges that require independence. When you've developed confidence in your ability to handle small problems, learn new skills, and meet your basic needs independently, you're better prepared to tackle major life challenges without becoming overwhelmed or overly dependent on others' support. The goal isn't to become completely self-sufficient or to avoid all interdependence with others. Humans are social beings who benefit from connection, collaboration, and mutual support. The goal is to develop enough self-reliance that you engage with others from choice rather than need, from strength rather than desperation, and from the ability to contribute rather than just consume. Remember, self-reliance is like a muscle that strengthens with use. Each time you choose to handle something independently when you could have easily sought help, you build this psychological muscle. Over time, this daily practice creates deep confidence in your ability to navigate life successfully on your own terms, making you someone who can truly win alone when necessary, while still appreciating and benefiting from relationships when they're available. Chapter 13. Turn criticism into fuel without losing your center. Learning to transform criticism into motivation while maintaining your psychological equilibrium is one of the most valuable skills for achieving independence and success. Most people either crumble under criticism, becoming defensive and discouraged, or they become hardened and dismissive, missing valuable feedback that could improve their performance. The ability to extract useful information from criticism while protecting your core confidence is what separates those who grow from adversity from those who are diminished by it. Criticism is inevitable when you pursue anything meaningful. The moment you step beyond mediocrity, when you attempt something significant, when you challenge existing norms or push past comfortable boundaries, you will face criticism. Some of it will be constructive and valuable. Some will be rooted in jealousy, fear, or misunderstanding. Your ability to distinguish between these types and respond appropriately determines whether criticism becomes a tool for growth or a weapon against your progress. The first step in handling criticism effectively is understanding its source and motivation. Constructive criticism comes from people who understand what you're trying to achieve and genuinely want to help you improve. This feedback is specific, actionable, and focused on behavior or performance rather than character attacks. Destructive criticism often comes from people who feel threatened by your progress, who want to keep you small, or who are projecting their own limitations and fears onto your situation. Developing the ability to stay centered when receiving criticism requires emotional regulation skills that allow you to process feedback without immediately becoming defensive or reactive. When someone criticizes your work, your choices, or your approach, your natural impulse might be to defend yourself, counterattack, or shut down. Learning to pause, breathe, and listen before responding allows you to evaluate the criticism objectively rather than react emotionally. The practice of turning criticism into fuel begins with separating your identity from your performance. When criticism targets your work, your decisions, or your methods, it's not necessarily an attack on your worth as a person. Learning to receive feedback about what you do without internalizing it as judgment about who you are protects your core confidence while allowing you to improve your performance. One of the most powerful ways to use criticism constructively is to look for the grain of truth in even poorly delivered feedback. Someone might express their criticism harshly, emotionally, or inappropriately, but there still might be valid points buried in their delivery. Learning to extract useful information while ignoring destructive packaging requires emotional maturity and the confidence to admit when you have room for improvement. Effective criticism processing also involves considering the credibility and motivation of the source. Feedback from someone who has achieved what you're trying to achieve and who has demonstrated genuine concern for your success carries more weight than criticism from someone who has never attempted similar challenges or who might have ulterior motives. This doesn't mean dismissing all feedback from less experienced people, but it does mean weighing criticism appropriately based on its source. The ability to turn criticism into fuel requires maintaining perspective about your overall trajectory while addressing specific areas for improvement. One piece of critical feedback doesn't negate all your progress or potential. It simply identifies an area where you can grow. This perspective prevents criticism from derailing your confidence while motivating you to address legitimate concerns. Using criticism as motivation also involves reframing it as evidence that you're attempting something significant. Mediocre efforts rarely attract criticism because they don't threaten anyone or challenge existing norms. The fact that people have strong opinions about your work or choices often indicates that you're doing something meaningful enough to notice. This reframe can transform criticism from a discouraging force into confirmation that you're on a path worth pursuing. Learning to stay centered during criticism also requires developing a strong internal reference point that doesn't fluctuate based on external feedback. When your sense of worth and direction comes from within, criticism becomes information to consider rather than judgment to internalize. This internal stability allows you to remain open to feedback without being overwhelmed by it. The practice of turning criticism into fuel involves actively seeking the lessons in every piece of feedback, even when it's delivered poorly or with negative intent. Ask yourself, what can I learn from this? Is there any truth I need to acknowledge? How can this information help me improve? This approach transforms every criticism into a potential growth opportunity, rather than just an attack to endure. Effective criticism processing also requires learning when to engage and when to disengage. Sometimes, responding to criticism with questions or clarification can lead to productive dialogue and valuable insights. Other times, particularly when criticism is clearly motivated by negativity or misunderstanding, the best response is to acknowledge it briefly and move on without getting drawn into unproductive arguments. One crucial aspect of turning criticism into fuel is learning to thank people for their feedback, even when it's difficult to hear. This response demonstrates maturity and confidence while often disarming hostile critics. It also encourages more thoughtful feedback in the future, because people see that you can handle criticism constructively rather than defensively. The ability to maintain your center while processing criticism also involves developing emotional boundaries that protect your core confidence from temporary attacks. You can acknowledge that criticism affects you emotionally without allowing it to shake your fundamental beliefs about your capabilities and worth. This emotional resilience allows you to feel the impact of criticism without being permanently damaged by it. Using criticism as fuel requires converting emotional energy from hurt, anger, or frustration into motivation for improvement and achievement. Instead of wallowing in negative emotions generated by criticism, channel that energy into proving critics wrong through better performance, deeper learning, or greater success. This transformation turns the pain of criticism into the power for progress. The practice of learning from criticism also involves recognizing patterns in the feedback you receive. If multiple people point out similar issues with your work or approach, there's likely validity to their concerns, regardless of how the feedback is delivered. Paying attention to recurring themes in criticism helps you identify blind spots and areas where improvement would be most beneficial. Staying centered during criticism also requires maintaining connection to your larger purpose and vision. When you remember why you're pursuing your goals and what you hope to achieve, individual pieces of criticism become less significant. They might point out areas for improvement, but they don't invalidate your entire mission or your potential to succeed. The ultimate goal of turning criticism into fuel is to become someone who actually welcomes feedback, because you've learned to extract value from it while protecting your psychological well-being. This doesn't mean enjoying harsh criticism, but it does mean appreciating the growth opportunities that come from honest feedback about your performance and decisions. Remember, the people who achieve the most significant success are often those who faced the most criticism along the way. Their ability to use that criticism as motivation, rather than allowing it to defeat them, is often what separates them from those who give up when faced with opposition. Learning to turn criticism into fuel while maintaining your center is a skill that will serve you throughout your life, making you stronger, wiser, and more resilient with each challenge you face. Chapter 14. Build a life that works, whether people support you or not. The ultimate expression of psychological independence is creating a life structure that functions effectively regardless of others' support, approval, or involvement. This doesn't mean living in isolation or rejecting all human connection. It means building such a solid foundation of self-reliance, internal motivation, and personal systems that external support becomes a bonus rather than a necessity. When your life works, whether people support you or not, you gain the freedom to pursue your authentic path without being controlled by others' reactions or availability. Most people unconsciously design their lives around the assumption of external support. Their motivation depends on encouragement from others. Their confidence relies on validation and recognition. Their systems require other people's involvement to function properly. This creates a fragile structure that collapses when support is withdrawn, when critics become loud, or when life circumstances change the availability of their support network. Building a life that works independently requires creating robust internal systems in every important area: motivation, decision-making, emotional regulation, problem-solving, and goal achievement. These systems need to function reliably, whether you're surrounded by supporters or completely alone, whether others understand your vision or think you're making mistakes, whether you receive recognition or labor in obscurity. The foundation of an independent life structure is clarity about your values, goals, and priorities that doesn't depend on external validation. You need to know what matters to you and why it matters, independent of what others think you should prioritize. This clarity becomes your internal compass, guiding decisions and actions, even when external voices are conflicting or absent. Without this foundation, you'll constantly be swayed by others' opinions and expectations. Financial independence is often a crucial component of building a life that works without external support. While you don't need to be wealthy, you need enough financial stability to make choices based on your values rather than economic desperation. This might mean building savings, developing multiple income streams, living below your means, or acquiring skills that provide financial security. Financial pressure often forces people to compromise their values and accept situations that don't align with their goals. Emotional independence is equally important. You need to develop the ability to maintain your emotional equilibrium without requiring constant support, validation, or comfort from others. This involves building internal resources for managing stress, processing difficult emotions, and maintaining motivation during challenging periods. When your emotional well-being depends on others' availability and mood, your life becomes unstable and your decisions become reactive. Creating a life that works independently also requires developing comprehensive problem-solving skills. You need confidence in your ability to handle unexpected challenges, learn new things, and adapt to changing circumstances without immediately seeking rescue from others. This doesn't mean never asking for help, but it means having the foundational skills and confidence to handle most situations independently when necessary. Your daily routines and systems should be designed to function without requiring others' participation or motivation. Your exercise routine shouldn't depend on a workout partner. Your learning and development shouldn't require someone else to push you. Your productivity systems shouldn't need external accountability to function. When your daily life requires others' involvement to work properly, you become vulnerable to their schedule changes, mood fluctuations, and availability. Building an independent life structure also involves creating multiple options in important areas rather than depending on single sources. Instead of relying on one job, one relationship, one source of motivation, or one approach to achieving your goals, develop redundancy in your systems. This doesn't mean being paranoid or refusing to commit. It means being prepared for the reality that circumstances change and people's availability fluctuates. The social aspect of an independent life requires building relationships based on mutual value and genuine connection rather than need and dependency. When you don't need others to complete you or fix your problems, you can engage with them from a position of strength and abundance. You can offer support because you have it to give, rather than constantly seeking it because you lack internal resources. Professional independence involves developing skills, reputation, and systems that don't depend on any single employer, client, or industry trend. This might mean becoming exceptionally skilled in your field, building a personal brand, developing transferable skills, or creating multiple income streams. The goal is to have enough professional security that you can make career decisions based on alignment with your values rather than fear of economic consequences. Creating location independence, where possible, also contributes to a robust life structure. While not everyone can or should be nomadic, reducing your dependence on specific geographical locations for happiness, opportunity, or support provides flexibility and options. This might involve building online businesses, developing portable skills, or creating social connections that aren't entirely location-dependent. The practice of building an independent life also requires regularly testing your systems to ensure they actually work without external support. Periodically challenge yourself to function independently in various areas. Spend time alone without external entertainment. Make decisions without seeking others' input. Handle problems without immediately calling for help. These tests reveal where your independence is genuine and where you still have dependencies to address. Mental and intellectual independence involves developing your own sources of learning, growth, and intellectual stimulation that don't depend on formal institutions or other people's teaching. This might mean becoming an autodidact, developing critical thinking skills, building personal libraries, or creating learning systems that function independently of external structure. Building a life that works independently also requires accepting that it might look different from conventional expectations. Society often assumes certain dependencies, career paths that require institutional support, life structures that depend on traditional relationships, or goals that need community validation. Your independent life might follow different patterns that optimize for self-reliance rather than social conformity. The psychological benefits of building such a life are profound. You develop unshakable confidence because you know you can handle whatever life presents. You gain authentic freedom because your choices aren't constrained by others' approval or support. You experience genuine peace because your well-being doesn't fluctuate with others' moods or availability. You develop real strength because it's been tested in solitude and independence. This independence also makes you more valuable in relationships and collaborations. When people know you don't need them but choose to engage with them, your participation becomes more meaningful. When you contribute from abundance rather than scarcity, your relationships become healthier and more balanced. When you can handle yourself independently, others can trust you to handle shared responsibilities reliably. The ultimate goal isn't to avoid all interdependence or to reject human connection. The goal is to build such a solid foundation of independence that your relationships and collaborations become choices made from strength rather than needs driven by weakness. When your life works, whether people support you or not, you're free to pursue relationships and opportunities based on genuine alignment rather than desperate necessity. Remember, building a life that works independently is a gradual process that requires patience and persistence. Start by identifying your current dependencies and gradually building alternatives. Develop skills, systems, and resources that reduce your reliance on external support. Test your independence regularly and address weak points as you discover them. Over time, you'll create a life structure that provides stability freedom, and authentic confidence regardless of external circumstances. Chapter 15. Become the person others turn to when they need strength. The highest expression of psychological independence isn't isolation or self-absorption. It's becoming so internally strong and stable that others naturally turn to you for guidance, support, and leadership when they're struggling. This transformation from someone who needs strength to someone who provides it represents the ultimate mastery of winning alone. You've developed such robust internal resources that you can not only sustain yourself independently, but also offer genuine value to others from a position of abundance rather than need. The person others turn to for strength possesses certain unmistakable qualities that set them apart from those who are still dependent on external validation and support. They have a centered presence that remains stable regardless of external chaos. They demonstrate emotional regulation that allows them to think clearly under pressure. They offer perspective that comes from having faced and overcome their own challenges. Most importantly, they've learned to lead themselves so effectively that their example naturally inspires others to develop their own strength. This transition from need to abundance doesn't happen overnight or by accident. It's the result of consistently choosing growth over comfort, self-reliance over dependence, and internal validation over external approval. Every time you handle a challenge independently, every time you regulate your emotions without external help, every time you maintain your standards under pressure, you build the internal reservoir of strength that eventually overflows to benefit others. The person who becomes a source of strength for others has mastered the art of non-reactive presence. While others become emotional, defensive, or scattered under stress, they remain calm and focused. This isn't because they don't feel emotions. It's because they've learned to experience emotions without being controlled by them. Their stability in turbulent situations naturally draws others who need an anchor in the storm. One of the most powerful qualities of those who provide strength to others is their ability to see possibilities when others see only problems. They've trained themselves to look for solutions rather than dwelling on difficulties, to focus on what can be controlled rather than what can't, and to maintain hope based on their own experience of overcoming challenges. This perspective shift often helps others move from despair to action, from victimhood to empowerment. The journey to becoming someone others turn to for strength requires developing deep self-awareness about your own patterns, triggers, and growth areas. You can't effectively help others navigate challenges you haven't learned to handle in yourself. This means doing the uncomfortable work of examining your own weaknesses, addressing your own issues, and developing your own emotional and psychological resources before trying to help others with theirs. People who provide strength to others have learned to listen without immediately trying to fix or solve. They understand that sometimes people need to be heard and understood before they're ready to receive advice or solutions. This capacity for non-judgmental listening comes from having learned to be present with your own difficult emotions without immediately trying to escape or fix them. Becoming a source of strength also requires developing the wisdom to know when to offer support and when to encourage independence. True strength building in others often requires allowing them to struggle through challenges rather than rescuing them from difficulty. The person who provides genuine strength knows how to support others without creating dependence, how to encourage without taking responsibility for others' choices. The ability to remain centered while others are in crisis is a crucial skill for those who provide strength. This requires having done enough of your own emotional work that others' pain doesn't trigger your own unresolved issues. When you've learned to sit with your own discomfort, you can be present with others' suffering without being overwhelmed by it or compulsively trying to make it go away. People turn to you for strength when they sense that you've successfully navigated the journey from dependence to independence yourself. They recognize someone who has faced real challenges, made difficult choices, and emerged stronger rather than bitter. Your strength isn't theoretical or borrowed. It's earned through your own experience of growth and transformation. Developing the ability to provide strength to others also requires learning to communicate in ways that empower rather than diminish. This means asking questions that help others discover their own answers rather than imposing your solutions. It means offering perspective that helps others see their own capabilities rather than highlighting their limitations. It means speaking in ways that build confidence rather than creating more doubt. The person others turn to for strength has developed what psychologists call secure attachment. They're comfortable with intimacy and independence, both in themselves and others. They can be close to people without losing themselves, and they can maintain their own identity without pushing others away. This balance makes them safe people to turn to because others know they won't be judged, controlled, or absorbed. One of the most important aspects of becoming someone who provides strength is developing the ability to maintain hope without being naive. You've learned to see potential for growth and positive change even in difficult situations, not because you ignore reality, but because you've experienced your own capacity for transformation. This realistic optimism helps others maintain faith in their ability to overcome challenges. The transition to becoming a source of strength for others requires letting go of your own need to be rescued or fixed by others. As long as you're still looking for someone to save you, you can't effectively help others save themselves. This shift from seeking strength to providing it often involves grieving the fantasy that someone else will come along to solve your problems and accepting full responsibility for your own development. People who provide genuine strength to others have learned to set healthy boundaries that protect their own well-being while still being available to help. They understand that they can't pour from an empty cup, so they maintain their own self-care, continue their own growth, and don't sacrifice their own stability to help others. This self-protection actually enables them to be more helpful because they engage from strength rather than depletion. Becoming someone others turn to for strength also involves developing the humility to recognize that you don't have all the answers and that your role isn't to fix others but to support their own growth process. You've learned the difference between helping and enabling, between supporting and controlling, between encouraging independence and creating dependence. The ultimate expression of this transformation is when your very presence becomes a source of strength for others. They don't need you to say anything profound or do anything dramatic. Your calm confidence, your steady presence, and your quiet strength remind them of their own capacity to handle whatever they're facing. You become living proof that it's possible to develop the internal resources necessary to navigate life's challenges successfully. This journey from needing strength to providing it doesn't mean you never need support or never face challenges. It means you've developed enough internal resources that you can handle most situations independently while remaining open to genuine connection and mutual support with others. You've learned to be both strong enough to stand alone and secure enough to stand with others. Remember, becoming the person others turn to for strength is not about being perfect or having all the answers. It's about having done enough of your own internal work that you can be fully present with others in their struggles without being overwhelmed by your own issues. It's about having developed enough self-reliance that you can offer genuine support without needing something in return. When you've truly learned to win alone, you gain the capacity to help others develop their own winning mindset, creating a positive cycle of strength and independence that benefits everyone involved. The person who has mastered the psychology of winning alone doesn't remain alone. They become a beacon of strength that naturally attracts others who want to develop their own independence and resilience. This is the ultimate paradox. When you no longer need others to complete you, you become someone that others genuinely want to be around, not from desperation, but from inspiration.